All right, everyone. So welcome to section 2 of our lecture on plastics and marine life. So basically, we're exploring the effects that plastics have on marine life. So we looked at a definition for plastic. Can anybody remember what plastic is, what it is made of? You can drop the answers in the chats. Yes, correct. It is made of oil and other chemicals. So the chemicals, so it's not necessarily made of the female hormone, but the chemicals that it is made with, such as the BPA, it acts like the female hormone. So sometimes chemicals exhibit similar behavior to different hormones in the body, and that can cause reactions that may be unwanted, especially if it is that the amount of that particular hormone is established at a particular level. And so when the chemicals in the plastics start to behave like that hormone, the body might start to think that, oh, we have this amount of estrogen or estrogen in our system, when it is that we're supposed to have this level of the hormone, and that might cause a certain reaction that might be unwanted, and so it can do potential harm. So today we're going to focus on the food chain and plastics. So as I said to you before, and we've discussed this, you know, fish, they feed on plankton, and there are two types of planktons. So there is zooplanktons, which are like animals. So they're like small animals and stuff like that. And then you have phytoplanktons, which are plants-like. So planktons are very tiny, like really, really tiny. You have to look at them through a microscope. That's the only way you'll be able to see planktons. But you can tell when a specific water body has a lot of phytoplankton, because phytoplanktons are green. So they have chlorophylls, and they have chlorophyll in their cells or in their body. And so that's the reason why they're plants, like, are considered to be plants, because they photosynthesize. So, and you know, we always look at food chains as the plants being at the base, and just like how on Earth or on the land, we would have the plants being the base of our food chain. In the marine community or the marine ecosystem, the zooplanktons feed on the phytoplankton. So even though they are the two tiny organisms that are usually at the base, zooplanktons feed on the phytoplanktons. And then the small fish, they feed on zooplanktons. And you have fish that actually eat the phytoplanktons as well. So squid feed on small fish. So this is the chain now. So the phytoplankton, they're there. And then the zooplankton feed on the phytoplankton. And then the small fish feed on the zooplankton. And then the squid will feed on the small fish. And it goes on and on and on, because of course, something else in the ecosystem will come and eat the squid. Anybody can give me an example of a marine organism that might feed on the squid? You can drop the answer in the chat. So let us discuss now, why is this problematic, or where exactly would plastics come in? So plastics now, because remember we discussed a particular type of plastic, or a particular aspect of plastics, which is the when the plastics break up into micro fragments and stuff like that, you call it microplastics, right? Yes, right, a shark or a whale, yeah, correct. Right, so microplastics might be floating around with the phytoplanktons. So remember I told you that microplastics are so tiny, they're as tiny as the phytoplanktons and stuff. They might come in different sizes, so there might be some that are larger and some that are just as small. So the zooplankton, when going to feed on the phytoplankton, might end up consuming some microplastics, right? And then when the zooplankton consume that microplastic, so tiny it's not able to break that down. So then the small fish feed on the zooplankton with the microplastics inside of the zooplankton. And now that small fish has microplastics inside of its system. So while the small fish is also feeding on the zooplankton, it is actually possible that more microplastics, depending on if microplastics are in that space, it is possible for the zooplankton to encounter, or the small fish rather, to encounter more microplastics. And same for the squid. So the fact that these plastic fragments are floating around in their environment and they're not necessarily able to distinguish between what is the phytoplankton and what is the microplastics. Like that would be difficult for marine organisms to do. It's not like they have a strain or anything of that sort. So once they go for a pile of food, they're just going to eat what they can, and they're not necessarily, even though they try to sift through, they still, it's unavoidable in most cases. And so it becomes a part of their food chain. Waterborne chemicals from decades of industry and agriculture attract to plastic like a magnet. And when these plastics mix with plankton, they are eaten by fish and become part of the food chain, as I discussed, as I explained earlier. And these toxins hitchhike on plastics. So like what this is saying is that the chemicals from the different industrial processes, they stick on to the plastic. So yes, the plastic itself is detrimental, but to top it off, there are other chemicals and metallic ions that are attracted to the plastic surface. And so these microplastics are coated with toxins that have even more severe effects. And so different types of plastics attract different types of toxins at different rates, making them more potent than others. So it's a very complex issue globally. And this is why it is so important that we try to play our part. Once ingested by fish, these toxins are released from the plastic fragments and are carried in the bloodstream and stored in the fatty tissues of the fish. These toxins have been linked with cancer, autoimmune disease, cognitive problems. And what they mean by cognitive problems is that it can cause brain damage. So if children consume fish with plastics that have toxins in them, then it can potentially affect their learning. They might become slow thinkers. They might not be able to process things as fast as a normal or average student. It can cause infertility in the fish, infertility in humans who consume the fish with plastics inside of them, and endocrine disruption. We then eat these fish, causing the toxins to enter our bodies. So this is why it is everybody's problem when we say that we need to come together, rethink, refuse, reduce, make, and recycle. This is why it's so important. So when you think about